Welcome to the Aria. It's fascinating that over 90% of our viewers connect deeply with our videos, yet choose not to subscribe Speech Balloon if you've just joined us. Welcome to a place where every story is a journey through hidden truths, unspoken emotions, and endings that leave you breathless. Backhand index pointing right, still watching but haven't subscribed yet? Now's your moment. Hit that subscribe button, because what's coming next will pull you in deeper than you ever expected. Bell, and don't forget to tap the bell, so you'll never miss the next chapter that just might change everything. Right arrow, one click, one emotional journey. Come with us. In a heartbeat, you can help us create even more remarkable content just for you. The air crackled with tension, wrapping around me like a second skin. The pounding of my heart resonated in my ears, a relentless reminder of the choice that awaited me. I'm Luke. At 24, I find myself alone in the quiet suburbs, just south of Portland, Oregon. I am just ordinary, nothing remarkable to see. Just an electrician, navigating the streets in an aging truck, sipping cold coffee each morning, and dedicating my days to scaling ladders, inspecting wires, and swapping out bulbs. My circle of friends is small. As time passes, they wed, relocate, or transform their lives entirely. I remain unchanged. Labor relentlessly, return home, savor fried eggs before the flickering screen, occasionally lose yourself in the pages of a forgotten book. I'm just not ready to give my heart to anyone yet. I'm driven by a singular vision: to open my own repair shop. Small yet powerful. A small shop bearing my name, where I can mend with care and integrity, pouring my heart into every repair. The dream haunts me in the chill of the rain, as I find myself beneath the kitchen floor, desperately searching for a shorted wire. That morning felt ordinary, yet something lingered in the air, hinting at the unexpected. After a long early shift, I found myself replacing a control board in a worn-down apartment at the heart of the city. As I made my way home, the phone rang. Dispatch was calling. A new client sought to inspect the garage lighting system in the city's west. It's not urgent, yet there's a strong desire for it to be done today. The address was in an upscale neighborhood, far from the usual spots where I'd seek out a humble electrician. I entered the address into the GPS and hit the road, heart racing. The sky stretched wide and clear, yet a biting chill lingered in the late autumn air. Red and yellow leaves tumbled to the ground, creating a delicate, vibrant tapestry on the sidewalk. I cracked the car window, and the rush of wind surged in, jolting me awake. As I entered the residential area, everything shifted around me. The asphalt road stretched out, smooth and inviting. Each house loomed large, guarded by its own gate, while the grass lay perfectly trimmed, a canvas of green beauty. A house caught my eye, its creamy white walls standing out, a dark tiled roof looming above. The black iron gate stood ajar, as if longing for a visitor. That was the place I had to reach. I killed the engine and stepped out into the night. The automatic gate stood wide, an unsettling invitation lingering in the air. I trudged up the paved path to the garage, each step heavy with anticipation. The silence was unsettling, devoid of barking dogs or the laughter of children. Only the wind whispers, and leaves tremble beneath my steps. The garage's side door creaked open just as my hand grasped the toolbox. A woman emerged, tall and poised, her silver-brown hair neatly gathered in a bun. She donned a gray cardigan, dark pants clinging to her form, and soft leather loafers that whispered of quiet elegance. She wore no heavy makeup, yet there was an undeniable presence about her, a quiet power that commanded silence the moment she stepped into a room. "You're the electrician?" she asked, her voice low, steady, yet piercing. I nodded, a faint smile flickering across my lips. "Luke, I hail from Cascade Electric. You're calling about the flickering garage lights," I said, gesturing toward the roll-up door area. Each time I swing the door open, a brief flash of light ignites, only to vanish into darkness. It flickers to life, only to fade away once more. "It's frustrating," she said, her voice devoid of any trace of irritation or gratitude. "This is an important announcement." I ignored it completely. Some customers held back their true feelings. Some were relentless. For her, she fit into neither category. I nodded, seized my tools, and plunged into the task. Vivian. I found out her name later, but I couldn't bear to linger like the others. I was left alone in the pristine white-tiled garage as she just gestured to the switch before disappearing back inside. In just 10 minutes, I uncovered the truth. The old light sensor was faulty, and the auxiliary circuit had been miswired from the last repair. I thought it would only take an hour and a half to replace and rewire it correctly. The room hung in a heavy silence as I toiled away. The only sounds were the sharp twist of screws, the quiet click of the electrical box, and the rhythm of my own breath. Yet, oddly enough, the silence didn't unsettle me. It was neither cold nor lonely. It felt as if someone was stepping away, not from apathy, but because they trusted you to find your own way. The lights in the garage turned on when I shut off the final electrical box and checked the system. "Stop flashing and be stable." I put my tools away, satisfied, and was ready to go knock on the door and ask her to come check. Before I could even touch the door, it opened. Vivian kept a comfortable distance while standing there without a coat and carrying a cup of tea. She looked at the lights and questioned, "Done." "Yes, I did replace every sensor. There shouldn't be any more issues for you. They must have temporarily hooked it up the last time because the old wiring was a jumble," I clarified while speaking softly. She nodded without adding anything else. She remarked, almost casually, "Are you in a hurry?" Just as I was ready to say goodbye and get out. "Are there any other switches in the rear that you might check?" Her voice was neither firm nor courteous as she spoke. I was taken aback, but not irritated. "No issue. I have a free afternoon slot," I said softly. Without waiting for an answer, she nodded, turned, and took the lead. I followed, and in that fleeting instant, I realized that I didn't really want to leave. Not because I was curious about this lovely mansion or because I got paid, but rather because there was an air of silence, grief, and suspense that compelled me to learn more. I trailed behind her as she entered the home through the side entrance. Soft yellow lights provided a reasonable amount of illumination throughout the space. The flooring were smooth oak. There were no footsteps, no carpet. The house was basic and contemporary, yet it wasn't frigid. A few abstract paintings with thin black frames were displayed on the walls. No relatives, no figures, and no mementos. Vivian moved forward at a leisurely pace, as though she were at a private show. She pointed without looking back and added, "The switch is in the hallway behind the kitchen." I responded as I took the voltmeter from my pocket. "I'll have a look." There were closed doors on either side of the little hallway. Vivian leaned against the side door and remained silent while I unlocked the lid of the switch box at the end of the wall. She stood too far away and didn't move, giving the impression that she was observing but didn't want to disturb me. The circuit was loose, and the broken switch was the one that operated the recessed light. I stooped to make sure I was screwing each wire into place. It didn't take long, but when I discovered that her eyes were still on me, my fingers trembled a little. Not the type of interest or attention that comes from someone recalling something from the past. I broke the stillness by saying, "I believe this switch was originally using the wrong bulb." "Oh, I don't know about it. I have outsourced all of the technical work since my spouse passed away," Vivian answered in a gentler tone than usual. She had never before mentioned anybody else herself. I gave a little nod, but I didn't ask any further questions. However, something had altered within. The work was no longer straightforward. I was in the house of a woman who, due to necessity more than choice, lived alone. The lights were on when I checked the switch once more after completing the wiring adjustments. Vivian gave a little nod. She responded, "Good, thanks," while keeping her gaze on the ceiling. "Nothing." As I started to gather my instruments, I said, "I'll take notes for the office." After a moment of inaction, Vivian turned slightly and moved toward a neighboring window. A few maple trees in the backyard were losing their leaves to the breeze as she gazed out. I wasn't sure if I should go immediately or wait for her to elaborate. Has that ever been spoken to you? Sometimes you feel like you're vanishing from a house that is too silent. Vivian spoke in a tone that seemed to be speaking to herself rather than to me. I hesitated for a second and gave my bag's handle a little squeeze. Silence is only frightening, in my opinion, if you have no one with whom to share it, I said, afraid to look her in the eye. Vivian spun around, a smile, whether sardonic or accepting, playing on her lips. Thus, you may still share it with someone. I simply pursed my lips and grinned quietly without responding. The stillness was long but not oppressive. Like a piece of music that no one had to compose, it seemed as though we were both listening to the wind through the glass. I waited there for another minute for an unidentified reason, not out of courtesy. Perhaps it was the oddity of her perspective, which was neither eager nor totally desolate. I was interested and at peace at the same time because of this quiet. The afternoon light was softer when I stepped out of the automobile. Though not as blue as it had been in the morning, the sky was still blue. After putting my suitcase on the passenger seat and closing the car door, I looked at the home behind the black fence. I was hesitant to go for some reason, not because the home was opulent or because Vivian was so exquisite that she looked like a picture, but rather because, for the first time in a long time, I had walked into a place that was totally quiet, devoid of the sounds of a TV or air conditioner, and without anybody pointing fingers or seeming concerned. The only sounds were the light of the wind and the quiet presence of someone occupying the place. I departed with an odd sensation, but I knew one thing. I might not see her again, not of exhaustion or completion, but of having something that I didn't fully comprehend occupy my thoughts. I got a text message from an unidentified number a few days later. There was only a brief phrase and no welcome. Would you be able to visit this afternoon if you're free? I believe there is a broken switch in the rear of the home. I didn't have to inquire about the sender. I knew the writing style, but I hadn't preserved the number. Uncomplicated, plain, and a bit aloof, as though the author was not accustomed to delivering commands yet had never needed to beg for anything. By the time I got there, it was almost 4. The lawn was thin with the midday light. As before, the door was open, but the iron gate remained open. I said after giving the door a gentle tap. I remained quiet and said, "It's me, Luke." Vivian emerged quietly, her presence both delicate and powerful. She wore a white shirt with rolled sleeves, her hair pulled back tightly. She was barefoot today, which somehow made her look more vulnerable, more alive, as if the earth beneath her feet connected her to something deeper. The air around her crackled with unspoken emotions, drawing in those who dared to gaze upon her. In that moment, she was both fragile and fierce, a whirlwind of feelings waiting to be unleashed. "Human, you brought Tool," she said, her eyes searching for answers. "Always," I whispered, raising the bag in my hand. Her head dipped in silent agreement. "Neither in the kitchen nor the hallway. It lies hidden in the back, an ancient room shrouded in mystery. I suspect the light's malfunctioning, yet I can't bring myself to open it. Allow me to see." I nodded, my eyes lifting with a spark of curiosity. Vivian guided me through the kitchen, then abruptly turned right. I had never set foot in that place before. The soft yellow light seeped through the heavy curtains, creating a smoky dance of shadows on the walls. We paused before the shadowy wooden door. The handle felt lackluster and maybe it had been untouched for ages. Vivian froze, caught in a moment that felt like an eternity. She lingered in silence, her thoughts hidden, as if allowing the room to brace itself for what was to come. The door had remained sealed for years. Her hand trembled as it hovered over the doorknob. I remained silent. I remained frozen, a silent observer acutely aware that my every move awaited permission. Vivian swung the door open. The room was shrouded in shadows, a single tall window casting slanted beams of light through the dust-laden air. Place of creation. The scent hit me, old paint, worn wood, and a hint of something extraordinary, like the essence of a long-buried memory. In the center of the room stood an old easel, bearing an unfinished picture frame, a silent testament to dreams left hanging in the air. Paintings lined the wall, some shrouded in cloth, others exposed, each whispering secrets of their own. A dusty upright piano stood in the corner, holding secrets, untouched yet alive. A manuscript lay on the shelf, alongside tubes of drying paint and a brownish-yellow envelope, untouched and waiting. Every day he poured his soul onto the canvas. Vivian spoke, her voice tinged with a haunting distance, as if she were recounting the tale of someone who had faded into mere shadow. I stepped inside, treading lightly on the wooden floor, determined not to disturb the thick layer of dust that lay undisturbed. The ceiling light dangled from a twisted wire, an antique relic, shrouded in darkness. Text, "I suppose this is the light you mean," I said, gesturing toward the ceiling. Vivian's head dipped ever so slightly. I attempted to power it on just once. I watched it fail to ignite, and in that moment I surrendered. No one dares to enter this place. I slid the stool away and ascended to take a look. Just as she had warned, the wire lay shorted, the joints hung loose, and the plastic cover had decayed with the passage of time. I grabbed my tools and set to work, the silence of the room pressing in around me. Vivian stayed. She lingered by the piano, her fingers brushing softly against the worn wooden lid. She left it closed. She let it slip away. Her fingers brushed against it, a fleeting moment of remembrance. This room clings to the remnants of his presence. Alive, she whispered, her voice resonating like thunder through the storm. I glanced down, locking eyes with her as she stared into the void at the center of the room. Empty of tears, devoid of strength, yet fiercely proud in her solitude. After the funeral, I shut the door behind me, sealing away the world outside, not because I wanted to forget, but because entering felt like a desperate need to reach out and touch him in every way possible. She continued slowly. Silence enveloped me. It wasn't that I lacked words. It was the weight of knowing I shouldn't speak. I removed the worn wire, fitted a new connector, secured it firmly, and gave it another shot. As I flipped the switch by the door, the yellow light burst to life, gentle yet unwavering. Vivian's gaze was unwavering. She stared at the ceiling, light glinting in the corners of her eyes, as if something had emerged from the shadows. "You're the first to step into this room in nearly 6 years," she said, her gaze fixed on the light. I dropped my hand, stowed my tools, and stood frozen, scanning the room. The drawings, the scraps of paper, the faint fingerprints on the wooden table, and that unopened letter linger in the air, heavy with unspoken words. This can continue. I exhaled deeply. Your love for me is undeniable. I spoke softly, my words laced with genuine emotion. Vivian finally faced me, her expression neutral, a void of emotion between us. Her gaze lingered, as if I had unveiled a truth she believed was forever hidden. I slipped the final screwdriver into my pocket, yet I remained rooted in my chair. The room glowed, a dim yellow light casting shadows that made everything feel achingly vivid. What once lingered in the shadows now emerged, revealing blotchy brush marks, smudged handprints, and a single strand of gray hair clinging to the tabletop. I couldn't understand why those details caught my attention. I felt as though I had stepped into the life of someone who had truly experienced everything. Vivian approached the easel, her heart racing as she slowly unveiled what lay beneath the cloth. Underneath lay an incomplete painting, the silhouette of a woman without a face, lost among the trees. "He began this just a week before his death," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the canvas. I rose and moved cautiously forward, maintaining a safe distance. "Is that you in the painting?" I whispered my question, barely audible. Vivian shook her head. I asked him. He smiled softly and replied, "Not you yet. Perhaps in another life you wandered freely, letting your thoughts drift away, losing yourself in the moment." She spoke, her lips quivering, caught in a bittersweet smile. I'm lost, but I don't need clarity at this moment. But you held on to it, I said softly, my fingers brushing the wooden edge of the easel. Holding on to it is the only way I can truly believe he was here, she whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. A sudden dryness gripped my throat, leaving me bewildered. Perhaps I once believed that loss was a fate reserved for others. The elderly, the long-suffering, those familiar with heartache. Vivian stood tall, her voice steady, and in that moment, I grasped a profound truth. Loneliness doesn't stem from age, but from the haunting absence of someone who once truly understood you and then vanished. Vivian approached the bookshelf next to the piano, her heart racing as she spotted the dark brown envelope, the unopened letter waiting in silence. She grasped it, turning it slowly in her palm, savoring the heaviness of the memory. I discovered it in your pocket after the funeral. Without a signature or date, could remain incomplete. Perhaps it is meant for me. It might not be, she whispered, returning the letter to its rightful place. You never even attempted to open it, I said softly. No, she shook her head, a silent storm brewing within her. Fear gripped me. Reading it felt like stepping into the abyss. It would go unspoken if I didn't say anything, and I could imagine anything. I nodded, sometimes without realizing, as a way to express hope. Vivian's eyes softened for the first time as she stared at me. They weren't shining, but rather had the appearance of someone who has started to think that the other person has come because he truly wants to be there, not because he's curious. A few minutes later, with neither of us saying anything more, we exited the room. She turned the key, but instead of locking the door as previously, she left it open as I softly closed it, as though someone had come into the room this time to make it more cheerful rather than to take it away. We paused in the kitchen. For the first time, Vivian poured tea, a somewhat fragrant tea made from dried flowers. Fragrant like memories, but without milk or sugar. She gave me a cup, then settled into the chair across from me, resting a gentle palm on her teacup. Strangers accessing that area is not something I'm used to. However, you? She looked out the window and remarked, don't seem like a stranger. I simply know, but I'm not sure I comprehend anything. I honestly said, I feel at peace, and drank a tiny drink. The backyard was covered in shadows that resembled a vibrant painting as the sun slanted through the late-season leaves outside. I no longer thought of Vivian as a wealthy elderly woman who lived alone in a villa at that very moment. In my opinion, she was a lady who was proudly keeping a piece of herself intact without seeking assistance. But she still hoped that someone would be considerate enough to spend more than an afternoon. And I knew then and there that I would return. Not for the salary or the switch. However, since I wanted to understand that woman the way I knew every electrical wire in the wall, it was a little difficult, but it would light up if I was patient enough. That day, I fixed the switch in the gallery and decided not to return. I did so because I believed that, not because I didn't want to. I doubt that someone like Vivian, who is calm, self-assured, and not eager to keep anybody, would want to call me again. However, I got the same brief note 2 weeks later. Tomorrow afternoon, are you free? I want to look at the lights on the porch. No greeting, no name. However, I grinned after reading it. I arrived this time on a little wet afternoon. The sky was a light shade of gray. Water was trickling from her garden's trees. The entrance door was opened by Vivian. She didn't often come out to welcome me in that manner. Enter. In the back are the porch lights. She leaned over to allow me in and remarked, you should be able to handle the drizzle. I'm wearing rubber gloves and a raincoat. Out of habit. I picked up my purse and said, no problem. There was a big wooden porch at the rear of the house with a view of the garden, so I went down the hall. Others of the string lights flickered sporadically, others were damaged, and some were not lighted at all. While Vivian was reading in the adjacent living room, I started to inspect each plug. Except for the odd rustle of paper and the gentle patter of rain on the roof, everything was silent. Since his death, I have been spending every morning on the porch. When she noticed me tightening the connections, she replied, Just a cup of tea in silence. I smiled and said, "You know, a habit that helps you keep time?" No, as if I were experiencing the aspect of him that he was unable to utilize. She spoke in a kind, confiding tone. I didn't respond. I felt, in part because my throat was constricted. Something that lovely shouldn't be interrupted by me. I fixed it for over 2 hours that day. As I closed the final lid, the rain was starting to clear. As before, Vivian poured me a cup of tea. Simply place it on the porch's wooden table and take a seat in the chair across from it without asking any questions or sending out any invites. I remained motionless for a while, observing the new light fixture's uniform illumination as its yellow light bounced off the damp wooden boards. "I have no idea why you decided to text me." I looked at her and replied, "There are bigger, more professional services. You left no issue behind." So Vivian laughed while continuing to gaze at the garden. "You didn't strive to fill the void when you arrived. You were finished." I turned my fingers on the teacup and said softly, "I don't think every silence needs to be filled." I noticed a sort of agreement without a nod in her eyes, even if she didn't respond. I started going to her place more frequently after that, but not always for repairs. On certain days, the kitchen lighting needed to be changed, and on other days, the circuit board needed to be checked. She did, however, text me one day to see if I was available for afternoon tea. There was a padded chair beside the porch window where Vivian always sat. She avoided social media, read paper books, and enjoyed chamomile tea. No iPad, no smartphone. "I've seen the world go faster than my heart can handle," she once remarked. "Don't you feel lonely now that I asked?" Vivian raised her head and gave me a brief glance. "Being lost is not the same as loneliness." "I go with the head," she said, taking a drink of her tea. "And me?" I paused. "I'm not always sure if I'm being forced into being lost or choosing. Despite your youth, you appear to have experienced some hardships." She spoke with recognition rather than sympathy. What sort of relationship we had at the time is unknown to me. We weren't pals because we didn't talk or joke around. Not between a grandmother and her grandchild, as even with age, the gap still doesn't seem like blood. She hasn't paid me back in the customary manner for a long time. Therefore, I'm not a client. She then placed a paper bag by the entrance, which contained a folded piece of paper and a gray wool scarf. When you have to climb the roof on chilly days. Although I can't knit as quickly as I once could, the yarn is still sturdy. When I got the present, I stood in front of the door for a while. It made my heart sink. Not because I was shocked. It was the type of sinking that gave me the impression that I had never received such gentle care. I went to check the heating in the living room at Vivian's house early one winter morning as Portland was starting to get covered in white frost. Her gait faltered and she opened the door more slowly than usual. She leaned against the door frame after coughing a little. She remarked, "You're just in time," with a faint smile that belied the fatigue visible on her brow. "Are you feeling ill?" I inquired as I entered. "It's just a winter cold," she said, drawing her scarf tighter over her neck. "I'm old. My resistance can't keep up with the weather." I cleaned the exhaust fan of dust and inspected the heater. I heard Vivian switch on the piano as I was doing so. She simply opened the lid and shut it without playing. When I was 8, I started taking piano lessons. As though looking for memories, she began to move her fingers over the keys. I asked, lifting my head slightly off the ground, "Do you remember now?" Vivian gave a little smile. "My hands aren't as gentle as they once were, but I remember." I said, "Try it," as gently as if urging a buddy to take up walking. After a moment of hesitation, Vivian reached for the keys. Thin, hesitant, and off-key, the sound echoed. There was something very genuine, though, a person attempting to touch her oldest part in between the off-key sounds. I got up and took a seat in the chair across from the piano. I merely listened without saying anything. A few words later, Vivian stopped. "I fear that everything she breathed will be forgotten." I responded, without giving it too much thought, "You don't have to remember everything. Just remember enough to keep yourself intact." Vivian's eyes softened for a moment as she gazed at me. Calm, Not depressed. I'm heading to the doctor tomorrow. Vivian texted me a week later. Nothing. However, could you come over and feed the cat if I'm running late? I was unaware that she had a feline. However, I replied that, as before, you should just place the key beneath the potted plant. At 5 p.m., I arrived. The next day, there was silence in the house. On the kitchen table was a message. Oliver is the name of the feline. It's not necessary for you to call him. Only when he finds someone sufficiently calm does he come out. I opened the cat food container and poured water for the cat. No feline. However, I was sitting on the porch in an ancient chair with a cup of warm dried flower tea that I had no idea who had prepared. I waited for something in my heart to clean up, not for Vivian. Oliver, a white and yellow cat, appeared out of nowhere, tiptoed over, and sat down next to me just as I was ready to stand up. Just there, no rubbing, no meowing. Similar to Vivian. I was still on the porch that night when Vivian came back. The temperature dropped. She didn't inquire as to why I hadn't returned home yet, but she seemed a bit taken aback. She hung off her coat and asked whether I had made tea. Perhaps you forgot. I smiled. Pulling up a chair opposite from me, she said, Perhaps I remembered you were coming. We sat quietly. What do you think? I asked after a long time. Yes, we are. Vivian avoided eye contact with me. We are something that others won't understand, she remarked gently after pouring more tea. We also don't have to explain. I gave a nod. I need not give it a name, simply be present. I don't have to keep you either. She smiled and said, Just come. Since then, I've come to realize that some relationships exist that are devoid of names, assurances, age, or situation. Without knowing if spring will arrive or not, they just exist, like a light warm enough for one person to bravely travel through winter with another. Vivian felt alive without the help of a young man. To remind her that she was still there, she only needed someone who didn't mind staying in the old room for a quick afternoon tea in quiet. Vivian didn't need to be hidden, in my opinion. I never thought of it as a secret, not because I was proud or because I wanted to make something unclear apparent. I told Tyler, my closest buddy from high school, about adjusting the lights in a closed room, about my first cup of chamomile tea, about Oliver, and about the afternoons when nobody spoke yet. I was still full late one night while we were having a beer. I saw him laughing as I told him, giving me a shoulder pat and remarking, It sounds like a movie, but I understand. However, Tyler remained silent for a while before squinting at me, perhaps unsure of what he had just heard. You're discussing, you mean a woman in her 60s? Tyler raised an eyebrow in question. 65, I said, maintaining an even tone. With a sarcastic tone, he said, And you sit there drinking afternoon tea, fixing switches, staring at cats. I answered slowly, I don't see what's funny. Although Tyler did laugh, it was the type of chuckle that unnerved me, laughing to justify something that others didn't get. So he leaned his elbows on the table and said, Listen, Luke, she is a wealthy widow who lives alone. You have nothing and are an electrician. What are your thoughts? Is what she wants. I stared straight ahead as I clasped the beer can in my palm. You are not thinking that. What do you think you're doing, using screwdrivers to win her over? Tyler shook his head and chuckled. I realized that words wouldn't alter what was going on in his mind, so I got up and grabbed my jacket. Not because I was angry. Before they were known, abnormal objects were frequently mocked. 3 days later, a coworker texted me while I was working at a property close to the center. You're famous, dude. A connection was present. I gave it a click. Someone in Vivian's neighborhood, possibly a neighbor, posted it on social media. In a grainy but identifiable faraway shot, I was carrying my shopping bag out of Vivian's gate while wearing a blouse with the sleeves pushed up on my shoulders. According to the description, good service seems to be very valuable, but money can't buy love. The post sparked a flurry of comments. Some laughed, others sneered. She was more than a mere collector of paintings. This guy really knows how to connect. I absorbed it with a calm heart. I felt a profound emptiness. The silent drum struck me deep in the chest, right where I believed hope was taking root. Uncertainty gripped me as I waited, but then, 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Vivian. I let it ring out unanswered, not out of shame. I was lost, unsure of the expression to wear. How do you meet the gaze of someone who once illuminated your world without pulling them back into the shadows? That afternoon, I got a call from someone in the art world, and the news hit hard. Vivian stood in the shadows of her dreams, the weight of a lost art exhibition contract crushing her spirit. The organizers implied it without saying a word, suggesting she was entangled in a relationship shrouded in ambiguity. It clashed with the very essence of an artist devoted to tradition. I lingered in the parking lot, bathed in the dull afternoon light, surrounded by the relentless honking of cars. I understood. I wasn't the sole cause, yet I became the clearest reason to blame. A young electrician emerges from the gate of a wealthy widow's house, and to the outside world, his presence is anything but innocent. After discovering the truth about the contract, I stopped responding to Vivian's messages. I let it ring unanswered. I penned a few words, then erased them all. I regret it deeply. I never intended for this to happen. Let me clarify. Yet none could fill the void. The look she gave me was etched in silence, and my presence only deepened her pain, an unwelcome reminder of what I couldn't undo. I arrived at work, lost in the monotony, checking the lights, fixing the fuse, replacing the shorted wire. Each task a reminder of the weight of the day. Each time I grasped the screwdriver, her words echoed in my mind. You leave an emptiness behind. You exist in that moment. I once believed it was a recognition. It struck me as a warning. Enter, and I must either endure the depths or escape before it consumes me. Nearly a week passed before her final message arrived. Untitled, no introduction, just a brief glimpse, sharp and stunning like a razor's edge. If a flicker can dazzle you, then keep moving forward. I don't hold on to those who tremble at their own reflection. I kept reading that line, each time feeling its weight pull me deeper. I felt nothing but a deep, unsettling void. I felt nothing but acceptance. I felt a surge of emotions. Exactly. Vivian's words were brief, yet each one cut deep, striking with precision and intensity. I realized she was beyond the need for anyone's pity. She didn't require anyone's presence born from feelings of inadequacy. She longed for someone fearless, someone who would stand firm when the light illuminated the deepest shadows of their soul. Perhaps I just wasn't prepared in that moment. That night, I roamed the city aimlessly, lost in my thoughts. Amidst the glowing streets, the inviting cafes, the couples sharing whispers and laughter, I sat on a wooden park bench, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, silence enveloping me. Every afternoon tea lingered in my mind, each fractured tale echoing, every silence from Vivian heavy with unspoken weight, as if she carried the universe within her gaze. The scent of dried flowers lingers, the discordant notes of the piano echo, and Oliver the cat remains etched in my memory. His gaze held no judgment, simply a presence that enveloped me. I believed I was easing her solitude. Yet, she bestowed upon me a gift I had never dared to acknowledge. The profound sensation of being truly seen. Not due to my age, not because of my job, not because of my looks, but solely because I existed as myself. I turned away from her home. I pressed on, hoarding each hard-earned penny like a lifeline. Each time I opened the switchbox, her eyes flickered to life in my memory, just as they had when the light illuminated the darkness after 6 long years. Each time I spotted someone alone on the porch, Vivian's eyes flooded my mind, serene, yet profound like the endless wind that whispers through the air. And I realized the darkness holds no fear. The true fear lies in the inability to face yourself in the illumination others have provided. I plunged into work as if escaping a relentless pursuit. I tackled a range of contracts, measuring voltage in a dim, forgotten basement, repairing stage lights in a ghostly theater, and completely rewiring the lighting system for a fresh residential development. Each day, I was surrounded by a maze of wires, flickering bulbs, circuit breakers, and an unyielding white light. Yet, with each repetition, an unsettling sense of familiarity washed over me. As I replaced the kitchen lights in that small restaurant, the owner offered me a cup of hot tea, its gentle lavender scent wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I chose not to drink it. I clutched it tightly, feeling its weight, lost in thought. Once, I ascended to the ceiling of a wooden house on the east side of town. As I tightened the final bulb and flipped the switch, the warm yellow glow enveloped the room, just as Vivian adored. Softly glowing, perfectly balanced, reminiscent of a fading sunset in late season. I stood there, transfixed by the light, and then it hit me. I was aching for her. It had been nearly 3 weeks since her last message. I left my phone unanswered, my absence lingering in the air. Each morning, I stared at her number, fully aware that silence awaited me. Days like that turned into a relentless routine, a struggle to let go, holding on to fragments of a past self while yearning to move forward. One Saturday afternoon, having just finished fixing the wiring at a house, I found myself driving through Vivian's neighborhood, unstoppable, only searching. As I crept past the gate, a sight froze my heart in an instant. The porch light flickered, casting shadows that whispered secrets of the night. It's not just a sensor light, a flicker of yellow, the kind she adored, flickering to life as darkness fell. I stopped, silence enveloping me as I cut the engine. Pause for a moment, then step away. The gate stood ajar. I pressed softly. Stillness. I knocked, heart racing. Silence reigns. Another knock echoed through the silence. No response yet. An unsettling fear took hold of me. As I turned to head towards the garden, a man caught my eye, meticulously pruning a tree close by. The new gardener, I suppose. I approached. "Can I ask how long you've been here?" I inquired, my voice barely above a whisper. Brief but powerful. "Almost 2 weeks," he said, setting the scissors aside. I know the landlady well. The light was on, yet she remained inside, unyielding. "What's the matter?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. He let out a breath, heavy with unspoken weight. "I feel lost in uncertainty. I just found out she returned from a doctor's visit last week. She appeared unwell." She lingered on the porch, silence wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. At the mention of the hospital, she recoiled, her head shaking in silent defiance. Fear flickered in her eyes. He hesitated, then said, "I believe she's severed ties with someone. She never touches her phone." Her silence echoes in the empty pages of my letters. My heart raced wildly within me. A single step felt like a plunge into the unknown. The distance I believed was rooted in self-respect and shame revealed itself to be born from her fear. Not from the gaze of the world, but from a darkness hidden within her own being. I spun on my heel and strode toward the front door. Without a knock, I pressed my hand against the handle. It burst open. The house stood silent, impeccably tidy, yet devoid of the comforting aroma of chamomile tea. There is no cat. Empty stairs linger in silence. I moved cautiously, each step a whisper, as if the very walls held something delicate, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. The final glow of day slipped through the hallway, leaving haunting shadows on the wooden floor. I headed directly to the locked room, the studio belonging to her husband. The door stood slightly open. A yellow light flickered within. Vivian perched on the worn chair, her gaze locked on the incomplete canvas. She kept her gaze down as I walked in. Her hands rested on her lap, quiet, yet I noticed her shoulders tremble ever so slightly. An unfinished portrait lingered on the easel, whispering untold stories. Bent over the lamp, the yellow light envelopes my face. The sketches lingered in their incompleteness, yet I saw myself within them. In that instant, within these 4 walls. "You're scared I'll witness your vulnerability," I said, looming behind her, and I felt the weight of the world pressing down, each breath a struggle, each moment a battle. The silence screamed louder than words, echoing the turmoil within. I was lost, yet desperately searching for a glimmer of hope in the shadows. I fear I'm not strong enough to stand beside you. Vivian held her breath, her back still turned, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She inhaled deeply, as if rediscovering the act of breathing after an eternity. Vivian hesitated, her gaze fixed elsewhere, as if the weight of the moment held her captive. She sat frozen in her chair, her body seemingly emptied of all vitality. She lifted her hand, softly gliding a not yet dried brushstroke across the canvas, exactly where the warm glow touched my skin. "I can't let you see me like this," she whispered, her voice trembling from the weight of countless sleepless nights. "Weak?" I questioned, moving in closer. "Not immortal," she said, a faint smile breaking through, yet tears streamed down her cheeks. "I too am not immortal. I'm just an electrician," I said, settling beside her, maintaining a careful distance to protect her, yet close enough for her to lean on if she needed me. Her silence stretched on, heavy and profound. Then she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm afraid. If I falter, I'll be a weight on others. I am the one who has lost. I refuse to be the one who gets left behind." I lowered my gaze. Anger surged within me for the very first time. But never with her, alone with my thoughts. For pulling away just when she craved a presence to hold on to. For allowing my external biases to overshadow the truth within. I stayed because I recognized your strength beneath the surface. I walked away, convinced I lacked the strength to endure, my gaze fixed on the incomplete canvas. Vivian's gaze pierced through me. This time, her eyes held no pride. Exhausted and raw, they laid bare their truths. "I don't need a young person to make me feel young again," she said softly, her fingers brushing against my hand resting on her lap. "I long for someone genuine, so I can drop the facade of strength I wear daily." Raindrops began to fall, each one a whisper of something deeper brewing within the stormy sky. Gently, raindrops raced down the window, blurring the yellow light into a haunting melody of silence. We lingered in silence, the weight of unspoken words heavy between us. Nothing guaranteed, nothing binding. Yet in that charged air, a connection had been forged. A fragment of cloth, ripped apart by miscommunication, by fear, by the instinct to withdraw when pain strikes. That piece of fabric, despite its seams, remained a garment ready to be worn once more. Vivian reclined in her chair, eyes shut tight. I sat beside her, the space between us heavy with unspoken words. Yet deep down I understood I couldn't walk away. She sat there, surrounded by echoes of the past, yet slowly carving out her space in the now. Weeks after our reunion, Vivian beckoned me to her place one late afternoon. No specific reason. "Would you come over, please?" I went as I always did. She lingered on the back porch, clutching a fragile envelope. She placed it on the table just as I slid into the chair. "Just ordinary. I felt it was time to return some of the light you gave me," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "I left it untouched. If this is goodbye, I refuse to accept it," I whispered, my voice steady yet filled with emotion. Vivian let out a soft, yet infectious laugh. "It's not the end. It's just the beginning. I understand you've longed to open your own shop." "Yes, but I never believed I was enough," I murmured, my gaze fixed on the envelope. "I invested," she declared, pouring the tea with a steady hand. I poured my soul into the light. As I tore open the envelope, my heart raced. It wasn't much, but it was the spark I needed to begin my journey. And most importantly, it was Vivian's way of showing her trust in me. No title, no ownership. "I'm absent from the frame. You do things your way," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the yard. With a smile, I declared, "I'll name the shop my way." Vivian's eyebrows shot up. I spoke with deliberate slowness. Luke's lights shine, illuminating the path for others to grasp the truth. She paused, silence hanging heavy in the air. She nodded, captivated by an enchanting tune only she could hear. The spring that followed marked the birth of my electrical repair shop. A tiny shop nestled on a Portland corner. A stark white sign, bold black letters, devoid of embellishment. Everything was spotless, and every light shone brightly. I left Vivian's picture untouched. I kept her story to myself, hidden away from my customers. With each job completed, each house illuminated just right, a deep understanding washed over me. In the heart of the city, another soul caught a glimpse of that light. We remained worlds away from each other. Vivian stayed away from the shop, a choice heavy with unspoken reasons. I left her house before the night deepened. Yet each week we gathered for afternoon tea, perfectly aligned, every moment, every sip, just as it should be. We never dared to name it love, not even friendship, a silent presence, unwavering and steadfast, always there when needed most, without uttering a single word. Slowly, the question no longer felt foreign when someone asked, "What are you and her?" I offered nothing but a smile. Illumination. One fateful evening in late autumn, I found myself at Vivian's house, just like always. The air was biting cold. The scent of damp wood in the garden urged everyone to bundle up tighter. We lingered on the second-floor balcony, the world below fading away, a place she claimed was seldom visited. The tea remained chrysanthemum. I picked up a tiny cake from the shop close to my electrical repair place. From this vantage point, the entire street unfolded before me, stretching into the distance. The lights I had installed for the old bookstore, the cozy cafe, and the red brick house with its narrow windows still burned brightly. Balanced, gently, Vivian peered down the street, her gaze sharpening as the breeze whispered around her. "Every time I see the lights," she murmured, her voice barely audible, "I know you're still here." I remained silent. I glanced at her, then shifted my gaze to the street. What are those lights? I had placed them carefully, yet now they pulsed with the rhythm of my heart. Some distances are meant to remain, holding their weight in silence. Some connections defy labels. Some individuals arrive solely to remind you that the light within you still shines, even when you can no longer see it. Vivian was everything to me, and in some way, I became everything to her. The tale unfolds not merely as a love story, but delves into a profound exploration of what it truly means to be present. Vivian finds her youth within, untouched by the passage of time. Luke finds vitality beyond romantic love. They only have one another, in the perfect moment with the perfect touch. Some connections defy labels, yet shine brilliantly, illuminating the path through our darkest moments. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story brings you joy, sparks your thoughts, or makes you feel less alone, join the Daily Unexpected Stories channel to embark on these heartfelt journeys together. At any age, the presence of love and a gentle light can ignite the soul. When we learn to see and learn to cling tightly,